When it comes to deep frying, there's a lot of fake news going around, but don't believe the fry lies. We've got the juicy details that big cooking oil doesn't want you to know. People often say they could never deep fry at home because it's too difficult, but deep frying isn't particularly tricky. Sure, it can seem daunting until you learn the ropes. Still, there's only as much of a learning curve as there is with figuring out how to knead bread or cook pasta. Cookbook author and restless Chipotle blogger Mary Audette White tells us, "I get why people might think deep frying is tricky, but it's really not that bad once you get the hang of it. The key is having the right setup and knowing a few basic tips. It's all about maintaining the right temperature and not overcrowding the fryer." Amber Fletcher, co-owner of Fletcher's Original Corny Dogs, said you might come to love deep frying if you give it a chance, telling us, "Deep frying can seem overwhelming at first, but it's all about a bit of curiosity and a willingness to experiment. I started frying corny dogs in our family business when I was barely even a teenager, and it quickly became one of my favorite ways to pass the time at work, always trying to make each corny dog symmetrical and golden brown." It's true that deep frying has the potential to be messy, but it doesn't have to be. There are ways to keep on top of things so any potential mess stays in check. Audette White says, "With a little preparation, you can keep things under control. Use a deep, heavy-bottomed pot to minimize splatter, and keep a splatter screen handy. Cleaning up immediately after frying also helps keep the mess manageable."
Let's get this place cleaned up!
Yes, Godmother.
And somebody bring me something deep-fried and smothered in chocolate.
Of course, it also depends on what volume of frying you're doing. If you're making a batch of tempura or french fries for your household, you can probably keep the mess in check. But if you're making food for a huge crowd, it's likely to get messier. Fletcher says, "Often at the end of the day working an event, I can be covered in a mixture of batter and powdered sugar. A splatter of batter is to be expected. Just be cautious not to splatter the oil. Keeping the area where you dredge or coat your ingredients as close to the stove or fryer as possible can help avoid drips. And some people find it's less messy using a deep fryer than a pot on the stovetop." When you think of frying food at home, you might picture the kind of deep fat fryer that you'd find in your grandparents' kitchen. But you actually don't need a dedicated fryer to cook food in this way. In fact, you probably already own a pan you could use for deep frying. Audette White tells us, "While a deep fat fryer can make things easier, you don't need one. A large pot or Dutch oven works just fine. Just make sure it's deep enough to hold the oil and has enough room so the food can float freely." Food blogger and recipe developer Becky Harden of The Cookie Rookie notes that while cast iron skillets aren't her top choice, as they can be more messy, they are still a viable option. She says, "Other alternatives you might already have at home include a wok or a cast iron skillet. A wok is particularly good due to its shape, which allows for even heating and requires less oil than a traditional pot. A deep cast iron skillet can also be used, as it retains heat well and provides a stable frying environment. You can also buy smaller alternatives to full-size deep fat fryers. Fletcher suggests the Fry Daddy, which uses just 4 cups of oil, significantly less than a standard fryer. One of the most common myths is that olive oil isn't suitable for deep fat frying. This idea is usually linked to the perceived smoke point of olive oil, which is the temperature at which it begins to break down and produce visible smoke. At this point, the oil starts to degrade, potentially creating harmful compounds and imparting unpleasant flavors to food. For deep frying, you generally need to heat oil to between 350 and 370 degrees Fahrenheit. So if an oil smoke point is lower than this, it isn't suitable for deep frying. But the smoke point for refined olive oil is between 390 and 470 degrees, meaning the smoke point is well above the temperature at which you'd be deep frying. In fact, the USDA lists olive oil as safe to use for deep frying. Of course, some people just don't like the taste of olive oil, but if you do, it's totally okay to use it. Among the reasons some people are reluctant to deep fry is that they believe it wastes a lot of oil. It's true that you do need a fairly large quantity of oil for deep frying, but if you fry even semi-regularly, you could get more use out of that oil than you think. According to Harden, who doesn't remember seeing a pot of oil in their grandmother's kitchen ready for reuse? You can definitely reuse oil for deep frying a few times, though it depends on what you fried and how well the oil has been maintained. As a general rule of thumb, I like to reuse oil around 3 to 4 times before discarding it. Audette White agrees that it's absolutely fine to reuse oil, as long as you treat it right. She tells us, "You can reuse frying oil several times if you strain and store it properly. After frying, let the oil cool, then strain it through a fine mesh sieve or cheesecloth to remove food particles. Store in an airtight container in a cool, dark place." How much you can reuse your oil depends on how you've used it, though. Fletcher warns that oil used for heavily seasoned items like fries or breaded foods may burn and leave residue, affecting the oil's flavor. Deep frying has a reputation for being unhealthy, but that's not necessarily the case. And even those more indulgent fried foods are fine to eat as part of a balanced diet. There's no need to deny yourself. Fletcher says, I think the trans fat craze from the 90s gave deep frying a bad rap, but I am a firm believer in moderation. Before going into the fried food biz, I earned my degree in health education, so I think there is a place for fried food, and it's in my belly.
Bring me 4 fried chickens and a Coke.
You want chicken wings or chicken legs?
4 fried chickens and a Coke.
Audette White agrees that deep frying foods isn't inherently unhealthy, saying, it's all about how often you eat fried foods and what you're frying. Using healthier oils and ensuring the oil is at the right temperature so food doesn't absorb too much oil can make a big difference. She also points out that healthy foods like veggies, fruits, and lean proteins are all potential options for deep frying. Just because a food has been fried, it doesn't mean it loses its nutrients. It just gains some extra fat, which can be good for you in moderation. And it adds a depth of flavor that might be lacking in lower fat means of preparation, like air frying. Don't be fooled. There's more than one way to coat food for deep frying. In fact, according to Audette White, the options are nearly endless. You can use flour, breadcrumbs, panko, or even crushed cornflakes for a crunchy coating. For an extra crispy finish, try double coating. Dip in flour, then egg wash, then breadcrumbs or panko. It's all about experimenting to find your favorite texture and flavor. Fletcher agrees, suggesting that you should have fun trying new things in the kitchen. At Fletcher's Original Corny Dogs, we only use our proprietary mix, but in the kitchen, you can play with flour, breadcrumbs, different store-bought batters or pancake boxes, even cheese or bacon. Each gives a unique crunch, texture, and flavor. Fried food sometimes gets a bad rap for being under-seasoned. This often leads people to believe that it's hard to season fried food, but that's not true. You can easily spice up the coatings and batters used on whatever ingredients you're frying to make them even more tasty. Audette White says, season the flour generously. Don't be shy with salt, pepper, and your favorite spices. Paprika, garlic powder, and cayenne are my go-tos. Mixing the seasoning into the flour ensures every bite is flavorful. Hardin is also big on seasoning the flour used for dredging. She tells us, when seasoning flour for coating, consider adding spices, herbs, salt, and pepper to enhance the flavor. Popular additions include paprika, garlic powder, cayenne pepper, and dried herbs. Batter can also be seasoned with herbs and spices of your choice, and they can take liquid seasonings like hot sauce, maple syrup, or soy sauce. There are so many opportunities to add more flavor to your fried food that there's no excuse for under-seasoning it. It helps to have a thermometer for deep frying. According to Fletcher, when you fry at the right temperature, you can expect crispy, delicious results without excess oil. If the temperature is too high, it can burn the outside, leaving the inside undercooked. And if the temperature is too low, it can absorb more oil like a sponge and leave your dish soggy and oily. But Hardin says that if you don't have a thermometer, there's a solution. Without one, you can test the oil by dropping a small piece of bread or batter into it. If it sizzles and turns golden brown within a minute or so, the oil is ready. This is my grandma's preferred method of checking the temperature. And if your frying oil gets too hot, you can simply turn the stove off, which gives the oil a chance to cool down. Or you can add more room temperature oil to the pot to reduce the temperature. Some people are put off eating deep fried food because they believe that it's always greasy. But if your fried food is greasy, it actually means something's gone wrong. You should always get a crisp texture, not a soggy or greasy one. Audette White tells us, if the oil is at the right temperature, the food absorbs less oil and comes out crispy, not greasy. So if you've made fried food at home and it's greasy, you probably have a temperature issue. And when you get greasy deep fried food from a restaurant or fast food joint, that's definitely a bad sign about the overall quality of the place. Some people can also confuse sogginess for greasiness. It's easy for fried food to go soggy if it isn't eaten right away. Ideally, just serve it as soon as it's ready. But if you can't do this, cooling it on a wire rack or a baking sheet that's lined with paper towels can help retain some crunch. It's a regular misconception that there are only limited foods you can deep fry. People think about French fries, jalapeno poppers, and corn dogs, and don't go far beyond that. But there's a whole world of fried foods out there. Fletcher says, in reality, the sky's the limit, especially here in Texas. At Fletcher's, we're famous for our corny dogs, but at the State Fair of Texas, everything gets fried. Beer, Oreos, butter, Snickers, pickles, pies, the list is endless. If you can dream it, it's probably been fried. It's all about creativity and pushing the boundaries of what can be turned into a delicious, crispy treat.
Deep fried potato salad!
And there are plenty of inspirations from around the wider world as well. Different cuisines present many different options, including Middle Eastern falafel, Spanish churros, spring rolls from Japan, and so much more. If you're adventurous enough, you'll never run out of foods you could fry.